You can make your promises way more powerful using this new method, async and await. So before I show you async and await, I want to show you an example of where one promise relies on another promise. So we have 4 functions: prepare ingredients, bake cake, cut cake, and this pass cake. Now, before we bake the cake, we have to prepare the ingredients. Before we cut the cake, you gotta bake the cake. But before you pass out the cake, you have to cut the cake. And that's what I mean by one promise relying on another promise. And all of that is handled right down here. So now, if you run your code, after 1 second, the ingredients will be prepared, then the cake is baked, and then the cake is cut, and finally, cake is passed out. The problem with this is that it's really hard to read and maintain. So some very lovely people decided to create a new method for us, and it's called async and await. So now you can replace all of this code with a single function. Now you'll notice that this function looks very different from most functions. And one of those differences is this async keyword. And it does 2 things. One of them is it allows this function to return as a promise. So if I return something in this function, it returns as a promise, and I have to handle it like I would a regular promise. The other thing it allows me to do is use this await keyword. Now, once you put this await keyword in front of a promise or a function that returns a promise, it allows you to completely pause the code execution. Instead of executing this bit of code and then going down to the rest of the code and executing that, it actually pauses the code execution and waits for this function to finish its promise. And once it finishes, whatever you resolve will be stored in this variable. And you can treat this variable just like any other variable. You can log it to the console, manipulate it, and return it from a function. So once it finishes its execution, it stores the resolve in this ingredients variable so that we can log it to the console. After that, we create a new variable and execute a new promise, and we wait for that to finish. And once it finishes, it stores that resolve in this bake variable. Then, once it finishes, you can log it to the console. And this process will continue for every function call. If you have any questions at all, let me know in the comments below. And in the description, I have a GitHub repo full of real-world examples with a bunch of comments explaining everything that's going on. And while you're down there, you might as well subscribe. Now, just because you know how to use async and await doesn't mean you forget about .then. There are some reasons why you would use .then, like if you needed to handle a promise and it could be done in one line instead of a whole function. But an even bigger reason is because sometimes you'll have to work with older code, and in older code, async and await doesn't work. And so you have to understand some of the older ways of doing things as well as the newer way of doing things. So make sure you go check out that GitHub repo and look at those real world examples full of comments to deepen your understanding, and then go build something great.